Hi all of you. So let's today see this very interesting and important topic from NEET point of view. It is differentiation, dedifferentiation and redifferentiation. So usually you have a lot of confusion in between these terms and how they are related to primary and secondary growth. So let's see it today. A very interesting topic, short topic but very important. Now, so first of all, let's understand what is dedifferentiation or what is differentiation, dedifferentiation and redifferentiation and what is the basic relationship between them. So let's first understand how they are related to the growth. So first let's consider, so this is primary meristem, right? So first is primary meristem. Now primary meristem, so they have the ability to divide, means they are actively dividing. Now what are the different types of primary meristem? So there are some primary meristem example, like example if I have to say, so it is apical meristem, which include apical meristem, then intercalary meristem. These are example. Question directly can be asked from the example. Intercalary meristem, and then there is intrafascicular cambium. Fascicular cambium. These are examples of primary meristem. Now this primary meristem, it undergo differentiation. It undergo differentiation. So if you have to define differentiation, what is differentiation? It is when the primary meristem lose the ability to divide. Lose the ability to divide, right? And what they will form? So primary meristem, it will form primary permanent tissue. It will form primary permanent tissue. Now this primary permanent tissue, tell me, will it have any ability to divide? Because it lose the ability to divide, so primary permanent tissue won't have any ability to divide. Now can you tell me some of the primary permanent tissue? So here parenchyma, again this example will be important. Parenchyma, collenchyma, right? Even here you can include sclerenchyma. You can also include xylem. You can also include phloem. All of them are example. Now why I have written sclerenchyma, xylem and phloem separately? Although they are example of primary meristem, but they will not undergo dedifferentiation. Dedifferentiation only these parenchyma and collenchyma will undergo. So now question can be asked directly that which of the following will undergo dedifferentiation? So primary permanent tissue undergo dedifferentiation. Now how will you define dedifferentiation? So dedifferentiation is, it means simply regain the ability to divide. Regain the ability to divide. It means what? This primary permanent tissue will now become secondary meristem, and this secondary meristem will have the ability to divide. It will have the ability to divide. Now here again secondary meristem, very important example. So it will be vascular cambium. It can be Cork cambium. Cambium, all examples, Cork cambium. Then it can be interfascicular cambium. Remember, the intrafascicular cambium is example of primary meristem, but interfascicular cambium is an example of secondary meristem. Then this secondary meristem will undergo redifferentiation. Now redifferentiation means again losing the ability to divide. Again losing the ability to divide. Ability to divide. Right? So when it again lose the ability to divide, what it will form? Secondary permanent tissue. Secondary permanent tissue. Now this secondary permanent tissue, what are the example? So everything which start with secondary. For example, secondary xylem, secondary phloem, then secondary medullary rays, secondary cortex, right? Even here we will consider cork. Cork is also an example of secondary permanent tissue, right? So overall it's a lot of things. So let me just add some more color so that it will be even better for you to understand. So first you have to keep it in mind. Again, I am repeating this, just go through it. See, first we have talked about this primary meristem, right? Primary meristem has the ability to divide, and then after differentiation it will become, after differentiation it become primary permanent tissue, right? Primary permanent tissue. Then the primary permanent tissue become secondary meristem, and then finally it become secondary permanent tissue. So now let's quickly see how question will be asked. First question will be asked that what are the examples, which of the following are examples of primary meristem? So you will say apical meristem, intercalary meristem, intravesicular cambium. Then they will say, ask that primary meristem undergo differentiation and they will form, so you will say they will form primary permanent tissue. Then they will say that which primary permanent tissue undergo undergo dedifferentiation. So you will say dedifferentiation, parenchyma and collenchyma will undergo dedifferentiation. Then what is dedifferentiation? So dedifferentiation is regaining the ability to divide. Then dedifferentiation lead to formation of secondary meristem. Then they will say which of the following tissue will undergo redifferentiation. So vascular cambium, cork cambium, intervesicular cambium, they will undergo redifferentiation. Redifferentiation means again losing the ability to divide, and these are all examples of example of secondary permanent tissue. So in this way, see, mainly you will get confused with the examples. So example specifically you remember, right? Just cover it and just recall. Vascular cambium is an example of, parenchyma is an example of, intercalary meristem is an example of. Which process will form secondary cortex? So the answer will be redifferentiation. Which process will form cork cambium? Answer will be dedifferentiation. Which process will form parenchyma? The answer will be differentiation, right? So I hope that this part is very much clear, that how differentiation, dedifferentiation and redifferentiation are linked. Now, so overall, if we have this idea, then let's see how this is related to primary and secondary growth. Although secondary growth is not a part of syllabus, but still secondary growth basic you have to study and given in NCERT. So if we say primary growth, so just we have seen that there was primary meristem, right? This primary meristem, when it formed primary permanent tissue, this formation of primary permanent tissue, it is called as the primary growth. So if I ask you, primary growth involved differentiation, true or false? Yes, primary growth involved differentiation. Does it require dedifferentiation? No. Does it require redifferentiation? No. Understood? So formation of primary permanent tissue, it is an example of primary growth. So if I say formation of xylem, formation of phloem, formation of then parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, right? So all these are example of primary growth. This point is clear. Now you know that primary growth will take place early in the life of plant, right? Then we know that primary growth take place monocot. There is no secondary growth. In monocot there is only primary growth. Only primary growth. So these are some of the basic point about the primary growth. Then if we see the secondary growth, again I am repeating, secondary growth in detail we don't have to study, but yes, you should know the basic of it. So can I say that for secondary growth you need dedifferentiation, and you also need redifferentiation. Without dedifferentiation and redifferentiation, there is no secondary growth. There is no secondary growth. We have just seen dedifferentiation means the primary permanent tissue, right? It become primary permanent tissue. It will become secondary meristem, right? And when this secondary meristem, it becomes secondary permanent tissue. So this is the secondary growth. Is this point clear? Now where secondary growth take place? Secondary growth take place in gymnosperm, right? Secondary growth take place in angiosperm. Right, now you know that angiosperm consists of monocot, right? In monocot there is no secondary growth, right? And in dicot there is secondary growth. Now in dicot also we know that dicot will have root, stem and leaf. Now can you tell me where in the dicot there is no secondary growth? So in the leaf there is no secondary growth, right? So if I say all part of dicot plant show secondary growth, the answer is no. Only root and stem will show secondary growth, right? So in anatomy also this part you must have studied. So overall this is a overview of primary, secondary growth, how is differentiation, dedifferentiation and redifferentiation is connected with it. So mostly question is asked from the example. So just before NEET exam, just once go through this entire sequence once again. So keep on reading. I'll come with the next topic.